Hello, in this video I'll provide a brief overview of communication across the curriculum at the University of Wyoming. 3 topics will be covered: where this idea of communication across the curriculum came from, what its central insights are, and also why it should matter to faculty across the disciplines. First, I want to start with a brief definition of writing across the curriculum, which is the movement from which communication across the curriculum is derived. This definition comes from Penn State Berks. They note that writing across the curriculum is a national movement in the United States that's been designed to ensure that students have plenty of opportunity to write, revise, and discuss writing and other communication across their entire undergraduate experience. The basic philosophy is that students learn more and leave the university as better thinkers and communicators if they've had chances to write and communicate consistently across their college courses. Finally, Penn State Berks notes that the WAC movement has been around for about 4 decades in the United States, and that it exists at more than half the institutions of higher education in the U.S. The writing across the curriculum movement that emerged in the 1970s in the U.S. and Canada was actually an extension of language across the curriculum, which grew out of the U.K. in the 1960s. Writing across the curriculum was first formalized at the University of Wyoming in 1991, when the university required 3 writing-intensive courses and 1 oral communication requirement as part of its general education program. When the general education program was revised in 2015, the writing-intensive and communication-intensive requirements were collapsed into a single sequence of 3 courses. Since that point, the communication across the curriculum program at the university has existed to support faculty who teach communication-intensive courses. It may be helpful to realize that writing and communicating across the curriculum exist in different forms and flavors elsewhere, and may be referred to as writing to learn, writing to engage, writing in the disciplines, and/or writing enriched curriculum. As I see it, the writing and communicating across the curriculum movement offers instructors 3 central insights. The first insight is that writing and communication serve as modes of learning. This means that they don't just allow students to reflect or communicate what they already know, but that when we ask students to write or use other forms of communication, that it can actually help students make sense of the information that they're hearing and reading and to integrate it with their existing mental frameworks. One of my favorite examples of this is that of little kids who are learning to tie their shoes. If you've ever heard a little kid as they're tying their shoes for the first or second or third time, you may have noticed that they'll talk themselves through the process. It's really important here to realize that they're not just describing what they're doing, but that they're using language to make sense of an unfamiliar task. So this is a good example of the way that private speech actually serves to help learners evaluate, regulate, or instruct themselves. A second key insight of writing and communicating across the curriculum is that notions of good writing and communication are not universal. What I mean by this is that different disciplines have different expectations about what matters most in writing and communicating. This is true even if we do accept that there may be some common expectations across academic settings. This graphic, I think, is a powerful illustration of the way that making new knowledge, which is essential to any discipline, is carried out in different ways in the writing of those fields. The graphic illustrates research by Helen Sword, who studied differences across journal articles of various academic fields. A third essential insight of writing and communicating across the curriculum is that good communication is increasingly multimodal and is conducted through digital technologies and channels. One implication of this idea is that unformatted or relatively unformatted alphabetic text, what we typically think of as writing, is actually rarely the best way to communicate ideas. Thus, rather than expecting students only to communicate and work through knowledge in paragraph forms, we might want to instead encourage students to notice and communicate using combinations of words, images, document design and formatting, and dissemination platforms that are best fit for the situation. On the left is a journal article from an electrical engineering journal. Even though this is primarily alphabetical text, we can still see extensive use of document design to help readers make sense of this information more clearly, including on the second page a heading and a bulleted list that helps a reader to see more quickly key takeaway points for their own teaching or research. On the right-hand side, we see an infographic that contains relatively little text in the form of writing, but actually conveys massive amounts of information very clearly. Students are being asked to make sense of information in formats like these increasingly frequently. Additionally, I would argue that asking students to create materials like these actually helps them to understand complex material from the disciplines with increasing sophistication. So, what are the implications of these 3 central insights of writing and communicating across the curriculum? I offer a couple of takeaways. First, I think it's important to realize that teaching communication in the disciplines does not necessarily mean primarily teaching and enforcing grammar. Instead, especially at the upper level and graduate courses, instructors should be able to focus their guidance to students primarily on communication structures, purposes, conventions, technologies, graphics, etc. that are most relevant to that specific context. In the graphic to the right, for example, which is a general rubric for professional documents, you can see that grammatical accuracy is only one category of the way that this instructor evaluates students for their writing. Another major takeaway is that the more we ask students to use language as they're engaging with new concepts, the greater opportunity we have to help them solidify their knowledge and to recognize the misunderstandings that they may have as they're trying to integrate that new knowledge with their existing mental frameworks. Finally, the more we ask students to navigate multiple modalities, including what they hear and say, as well as what they see and what they write, the better prepared they are to adapt their communication approaches to varying settings. In conclusion, we are all engaged in the process of teaching students how to develop their language. I would argue that new knowledge, even in fields like dance or in lab sciences, is always embedded in language. Writing and communicating across the curriculum provides a way to help instructors to be more intentional about acknowledging this fact, as a way to help students both improve their learning by communicating with themselves more effectively, and their ability to use their disciplinary knowledge by communicating with others. Instead, I hope that instructors will see that it's essential to ask students to think about their language that they're using, both as they learn and as they communicate the important information of their disciplines. Ultimately, I hope that instructors will not see writing and communication as something that needs to be added on to their teaching,